Hello and welcome back to Environments Exposed. I'm so excited for today's guest. She's our first guest on the new version of this podcast, and her name is Celia Sasser. I'm very excited to have her on today because she's going to be talking about a topic that might have been on your mind recently, especially given our time frame for when this is posted around February of 2022. So you may or may not be thinking about love after Valentine's Day. And today we're here to talk about manifesting love with the moon. And so if you're familiar with our methods, the space method, spiritual, personal area, companion and community environments, this is the spiritual component of the method. We're going to be talking about the moon, the divine feminine, and I'm really excited to dive into today's content because Celia has some really good and juicy tips for us on how to manifest love with the moon. So welcome, Celia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on today. Would you like to share a little bit with the audience about what you do?
I'm a manifesting coach, and I create products to help women step into their power and to manifest in all areas of their life.
Fabulous. I love it. And I was literally just drawn to your website. We were talking earlier about how did I find you? And I was like, honestly, I can't remember exactly, but I know it was online and I know I was attracted to your website. And I thought, wow, she seems really, really neat. And I'd love to collaborate with her. So well manifested. But of course, this is what you do. So there you go. So thanks for
funny, it's like once you let something go with the manifesting process, something comes in. And I had just recently let go of something. And then all of a sudden I got your email.
Oh, there you go. Yes, that's such a good point. We have to release things in order to make room for new things to come in. So that's really beautiful. I love that share. So thanks for joining us. And I'd love to just dive into a couple of questions I have that I think our audience is going to really love having the answers to. So what are like a few really important things? Because I know people hear a lot of information, a lot of really good information out there. And then unfortunately, sometimes there's misinformation too about manifesting, or what I would prefer to say is incomplete information, right? There's a lot of incomplete information about manifesting out there, which unfortunately ends up turning people off. They're not doing it right. They watch a few YouTube videos and they think, oh, this is how to do it. So there's a lot, obviously, that we're going to cover in this program, and just also know everyone that we couldn't possibly go over everything you need to manifest love with the full moon in this program. We wouldn't have time. We talk about this for days, right? So I'd love to just touch upon a few of what you believe are the most important things that a woman or feminine identifying person could know about manifesting with love with the moon.
So with the process of manifesting, you have to be clear about your intentions. And so the reason why I use the moon's energy is because she takes us through a new lunar cycle where we connect to the phases for growth. And so pretty much when you're connected with her energy, you automatically know when it is time for you to manifest and the process through it. And so I feel like there's a lot of information about manifesting, but the one that really gets me is the thought that you just have to think about it and then visualize it and it appears, and the most important part is taking the action. So when I talk about manifesting with the moon, the new moon is so important in that aspect. That is when you should be setting your intentions and create a ritual around it. Really feel into what you want to bring forth. And so when you are setting your intentions, it has to be something that you believe and also something that's stretching you. And so, when we're setting intentions, we like to play it safe. And the biggest thing is you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because the minute that you put out into the universe what you're truly desiring, you will be stretched. And so what you truly desire is coming from a place of, it's not where you are yet, right? So there's those the ascensions that you're going through, like an up leveling. Mm-hmm. And if you are still playing it small or setting those intentions, then they're not going to manifest. Mm. So the one thing I'd like you to remember is that the moon, she is feminine energy, and she teaches us how to receive. She is ruled by the zodiac sign Cancer, which is very emotional. It's an emotional zodiac. And so that's why she brings up emotions for us. So when you think of like the word lunatic, Luna means moon, and that's why some people go a little crazy around a full moon. It's because our energy affects us in that sense. We need to remember also that our bodies are, around 70% water. And so if you ever wanted to know how she affects you, just go to the beach and see how the moon.
Yeah.
And another thing is that her energy, so there's a magnetotel, and she enters into the magnetotel 3 days before and 3 days after a full moon. So that's why you feel those energies intensely 3 days before a full moon and 3 days after. And you can feel emotional. You can also feel dizzy, lightheaded, because, she just really gets things turning in us.
Yeah.
And because she is, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to, you had said magnetotel. What does that mean? That means it's a magnetism, right? But what is it? Is that what that means?
So it's a magnetotel. It's like a sphere that surrounds, it's like an oval sphere in the universe that surrounds the moon energy. And so she's entering it into it and then moving out of it during the full.
Okay.
So if you think of it as an oval, it's like when the energies are most intense is when she is closest to it, to the oval. So, if you think of an oval on the sides of the oval, mm-hmm. when she enters into that space, that's when her energies are really intense.
Okay. And where does the magnetotel come from? Is it something that's created by?
It's just the energies of the moon. So it's kind of,
okay.
Yeah, it's kind of this swirling, intense, magnetic waves that just form around her. Yeah.
Yeah, I always found that so interesting. And it's a perfect, and I love the analogy you just shared, because I mean, my goodness, I think there are a lot of folks out there that believe that astrology and moon dynamics aren't a thing, but you can literally, like you said, and I share this with people too, go to the beach, the tides. If the moon is doing that to the water in the ocean, what do you think it's doing to the water in your body? Right. Because we are, like you said, 70% or so water. So the idea that we're not impacted by this is yeah, okay.
And even when you're dehydrated, when you're dehydrated and you're not drinking enough water, that intense energy that she's pulling towards you will cause those, where you might feel kind of off, and you could even experience vertigo.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. So for folks listening, this is another great reason to stay hydrated. We want to stay hydrated anyway. Say what?
Everything is connected.
Yes, everything is connected. That is such a wonderful thing to mention. So meanwhile, I'm over here.
Yeah.
Getting myself hydrated too. I love that. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just thought that was a really good point to kind of really nail down for people is, this magnetism that the moon has. And I love what you said too about the moon being feminine, and there are so many literal ways to kind of look at that, right? But what you mentioned too is that Cancer, the zodiac sign, rules over it, right? So if you look into astrology and what the whole Cancer, we can't get into, we're not going to get into that today, but the whole, like, what the astrology is behind that, that's really interesting as well. I also love to think about it sometimes too from like a literal perspective, where we think, well, not literal, but what I want to say is like translating what it means to be feminine. Like if we define what feminine is, one of the qualities that people often list is it's being in receiving mode. And I think the moon does that so beautifully, right? Because it's always receiving light from the sun, right? It's always receiving light from the sun, just like Mother Earth is. So there's so many parallels we can draw with that. I also loved your point about making things stretchy, that we, have some comfort points that we fill into, maybe it's a gratitude practice, right? Where we're, feeling into like what I appreciate having. I also still want XYZ, and making it stretchy, but attainable, right? I think
Right.
that, there's something in the mind that's like a gatekeeper, the mind and spirit, really, which is like, if it's too big of a reach or too big of an ask, I think our system just shuts it down. It's like, wow, that's just too big of a reach for me right now. So, for example, talking about love, if you are currently, in a position where you've been single for a long time, or you've been maybe calling in partners that haven't been a match, and you're trying to believe that you're getting your ideal mate in a month from now, well, or a few weeks or tomorrow, maybe that's like too big a leap for someone. Maybe it's like baby steps and beliefs. I always do this like incremental thing. If it's not believable, if it's just completely out of your ballpark right now, start with something that's more reasonable, and then just know that you'll change it again later. That's a really good point to make. Keep it stretchy, but not like completely out there, right?
Well, when you're first starting to manifest, when you're first beginning and it's new to you, it's better to start with something small just so you can start trusting the process.
Yeah.
Because once you believe, because that's a huge component of manifesting is having faith. Once you believe because you've seen something come in, then you'll be more open to receive something bigger. But, I want to reiterate that the moon represents your subconscious mind. So when you're wanting to manifest, if you have all of these limiting beliefs and you're wanting to call in, let's say you're calling in love, and you don't believe that you are lovable. Okay, you don't believe that you're deserving. You've got some trauma from childhood. So that will cause resistance in you being able to manifest, because you're still seeking things externally to fill up your cup. So in order for you to manifest love, you need to learn how to love yourself first. So when you're setting the intention to call in love, you can get really specific about the characteristics that you want in a person. You need to know what you feel deserving of, because if you don't know about yourself and you don't know what you're deserving of, then you will get whoever, and you're not really clear about that person. And so with the manifesting process, you're always going to be tested, right? So when you're calling in something specific that you want, you will receive a test. So let's say, for instance, you keep attracting the same kind of partner, and this partner is either unavailable, or they don't treat you in the way that you want to be treated, but you kind of settle because you think that that's all you're deserving of. And then when you decide to get serious with manifesting and you make that list, the test will come, like maybe you have a dry spell and you're like, there's no one there for me. And then all of a sudden you're being noticed, right? And maybe it might be someone you dated in the past. They might show up. It could be somebody that's very similar to that type of person will show up. And if you decide that you're going to go out with this person, even though they are not in alignment with the intentions that you set, you are still coming from a place of not being worthy. So you're settling. So when that happens, all of a sudden, you're going to have to go back to the drawing board again, because you're going to get caught in that vicious cycle again, because everything is cyclical. Mm-hmm. So when you say yes to something, you're going to go through the cycle, and then you're going to have to start from square one and get really clear. So when I work with the moon phases, when you set those intentions, when the light starts to shine upon the moon, so when you're in the waxing energy, that's when you start taking action, whether you're putting yourself out there to meet someone, maybe you're going to download one of the dating apps. Even if you're in a relationship, maybe you're in a relationship, because I find that this is really happening right now, because we are moving into the divine feminine energy. A lot of relationships are being tested. Mm-hmm. And if you went into a relationship not knowing your worth, you're starting to see how it's manifesting right now. So you're going to go through those tests, like maybe you want your relationship to improve. The only way it's going to improve is if you step into your worth. So that nurturing part during the waxing energy is where you're going to nurture you. It's your internal being. It is nothing to do with the external. And as women, because there is so much programming from the patriarch, we believe that we don't have enough and we've got to fix the external, whether it's, I need to lose weight, I need to, have a better job, or I need to look a certain way, and you can see that playing out over and over again, where women are compromising themselves because they think that they have to look a certain way because that's what the media shows, right? But when you step into your divine feminine energy, and what the moon is trying to teach us is that we are attractors. We attract love. We don't chase it. So if you're ever finding yourself where you're chasing it, you're creating resistance. That's coming from a lack and scarcity mindset that you don't have enough. And so then you're finding that you're being ghosted, or, it's like the more you make yourself available, the more they're not available. And, it's even if you're in a relationship, you'll feel invisible in your relationship because you're not filling your cup up. Because what is the most attractive? It is your inner confidence. When you feel good about you and you fill your cup up, that's when you just have your aura speaks differently, right? Your aura is vibrating in a different frequency. So you just attract people freely. So when you're in the waxing energy, it is all about taking action to fill your cup up, to nurture who you are. It's not about the external. And so as we move along with the moon phases, and let's say you're wanting to manifest this partner, so then when we get to the first quarter of the moon phase, that is the time where you have to revise. Like if it's not happening, you've got to make some revisions. Is it my mindset? What am I saying to myself? Because we're the hardest on ourselves. We look in the mirror, we critique ourselves. I mean, the things that we say to ourselves, we would never speak that to anyone else. And so that's where your subconscious mind is being challenged. That's where the moon takes us through that energy, because she wants us to bring that to light so that we don't bring it into another lunar cycle. So as you get into the first quarter, you can see where, if your manifestations aren't working out, where you need to tweak some things, regarding to your mindset. When she's at her fullest, That's why we get so emotional, because she's really bringing all of that stuff up to surface. So if you've been doing the inner work, you will see changes, and you'll see that you're manifesting, that it's getting closer. But if you're not doing the inner work and you think you can stay the same and still attract something at a different level, she will energetically bring that out. And that's when she's at her fullest. So that's why we get so emotional. And so that is why it's important during a full moon that you create a ritual around letting go of the aspects of yourself that you are no longer aligned with, doing the inner work, healing those wounds that you keep carrying in, because you're just manifesting more of what you don't want because you're not healing. Mm-hmm. So, and then after that, it's like you go into the last quarter. And the last quarter, you'll go into the waning energy. And the waning energy is very introspective. And the last quarter is asking you, what else do you need to let go? What do you need to change in your surroundings? What do you need to, create more space? How are you going to create more space for what you're trying to call in? And it's all about the healing process. And then we go through another lunar cycle. And it's beautiful because when we use the lunar cycle to manifest anything in life, it's not so linear. We don't feel like we're running out of time. It's very fluid energy. It's an unfolding of who you are. And so you're open to all that's coming in. But when we get uncomfortable, because all of that stuff, it's your shadows, right? They're going to come up to the surface when the light is at its brightest. If you keep pushing it down, you're going to keep getting more of what you don't want. So that's why people think manifesting does not work, because they're trying to skip the inner work.
Yeah.
And the universe is trying to get us to grow, right? We're in a growth process. We're here on Earth because we are part of everything that we see that is growing. We are growing too. And so that's why I think it's beautiful when you connect with her energy, you can see yourself growing. And sometimes it gets pretty damn ugly. Yeah. You go through those dark nights and you're just like, what the hell is going on? Everything is falling apart. And I do tarot as well. And in my tarot reads, that's called the tower moment. And so when you experience that tower moment, it is not because you're being punished. The universe isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to shake you up and see where your life is on repeat, because that's what you don't want. And so you get all of that stuck energy. If you're feeling stuck, it's because you're not taking the action.
Yeah.
You're not taking that leap. And you're not doing the inner work. It's always an inside job. It is not the external. And we're so programmed to the external.
Yeah, we really are. And that's such a good point. There's a number of points I want to circle back to because I just love so much of what you said. The feminine aspect of things, right, which we're talking about with the moon, she does not care so much about our timelines. And our timelines actually, interestingly enough, really derive from the push masculine patriarchal society that we're in. So I find it really interesting. One of the questions or concerns that often comes up with people is, why isn't it happening now? Where is it in this urgency? And it's interesting that we aren't often asked, but I believe the moon and cycle are prompting us to ask ourselves, what's the rush? What's the urgency? Where is this coming from? Is it real? Because sometimes there's urgency that's real, but most of the time it's kind of manufactured, right? And it's manufactured by the patriarchy that we're in. So I think that's a really interesting point. The cycles, and as you describe them, really have the potential to ground us in what's really urgent and front of mind and what we can let go of. And I love how you framed the cycles, right? talking about kind of the first quarter and, the curiosity around that, around what's working and what's not working. Also love what you shared about the full moon and how often that brings up a lot of contrast for people. So while some areas might be really vividly blooming, some areas might be going to crap, you'll see some kind of big contrast. And that's why, like you said, people often get really emotional because they're seeing so much juxtaposition between what they want to have and what they don't kind of coming up. And then that last quarter, that's really kind of, I don't know, I would call it like quality control. I don't know. Does that resonate? Right? Where you're like, okay, like we're going to be wrapping up soon. Like, what do we need to kind of like, what else do we need to look at? Right. And I really love what you said about creating space, because this really is about, our environment, the relationship that we have with the moon, with our spirituality, with our subconscious. Right. And that was a really big point too, that I wanted to drive home for people. Because I hadn't thought about it this way. The moon represents our subconscious mind, but that completely makes sense as far as like talking about, the masculine and feminine, and the feminine representing different parts of the mind and whatnot. So I found that to be really an interesting point. And what does that mean, right? The moon being our subconscious, representing our subconscious mind and how things are, feminine, maybe, subtle, but powerfully communicated to us through nuances, through our everyday happenings, through our kind of unexpected thoughts, the things that we channel. And so I really thought that was an interesting point as well. The internal.
Remember that your subconscious thoughts are things that are buried in the dark. So, the moon represents the darkness, and she gets brighter because the sun is penetrating his light onto her. Mm-hmm. So that's where your subconscious, it's things that you have a lot of guilt and shame around that you keep hidden. It's also those limiting beliefs that show up in your life as a habit of who you think you are, but it's really not your true self. It's just part of the programming. Yeah. Because even with epigenetics, we're finding that part of our programming is coming from our DNA, ancestral trauma that's being passed down from generation to generation. And so whatever your feelings are around love, for instance, with my mom, she didn't have a very high self-worth. She was a child of war. And so for her, it was always about finding the husband, right? And being very submissive and not really having any value. And so she, my sisters and I, that's how she raised us to believe that, it's like you're incomplete without a partner. And most women operate from that sense. So they feel like they're not whole because they're not in a relationship. But the most important relationship you'll ever be in is with yourself. You cannot manifest anyone that's going to love you more than you love yourself. So if you're coming from a place of not being worthy of, guess what? You're going to attract a partner that's going to treat you like you are not worthy of. And being highly empathic, most women, we are nurturers. And, if we're not aware that we're coming from those wounds, the partners that we end up attracting are narcissistic men. Mm-hmm. And that is because they feed off of your light, because you don't see your light. And so your light just gets dimmed even further and further. And so, when I hear women that are so focused, like hyper focused on a partner, and it's all this external, I just, want to say, hold on, do some work here. So when you manifest love, it's an alignment at the higher version of who you are, not from the wounded child, because you don't want to trauma bond with anyone. You don't want to be in a relationship. I've been married to my husband for 25 years. And when I entered into the relationship, I came from a wounded child. So I'm speaking from experience. And, we've been together for 29 years, and there was a lot of, baggage. And it's like you go through this and you grow, but you start seeing yourself differently. And because we are going through this transition right now where the divine feminine energy is rising, there's a high rate of divorce right now because, even with what's going on in the world and having to stay home, you're with your partners more, you get to see where you're operating from. And so it's getting back to your worth. So that's why when I was talking about, wanting to manifest love, it's not always manifesting love, new love. It could be manifesting love from the relationship that you're in now, because you've got to transition. If you want change in your partner, you have to change yourself. There's no way around it.
Yeah. And sorry, I want to pause here real quick. There was a point that you made, and I want to kind of like drill this in for everyone, about not being able to manifest someone who doesn't love you as much as you love yourself. Like you have to, like, that was a real takeaway, I think, key moment for people here that I'd love to just kind of ground us in. Right. So, and I'd love to, for everyone listening to this or watching this podcast right now, to just kind of check in, where are you with your self-love practices, how you feel about yourself right now? Are you feeling really good? Are you feeling like maybe there's some work that can be done there, from a place of non-judgment, from a place of curiosity, and just wanting to approach yourself in a way that's kind. Just looking at, where are you with that? How do you really feel about yourself right now? Because I think this is really important. And Celia, you touched upon a really important point about, especially because we do have an audience that is creative and sensitive, and there's a lot of empaths in this group as well. And looking at who we're attracting and who we keep in our vortex, right? And how we sometimes have to look beyond that. I know there's a lot of empath and sensitive patterns as far as, what we have to kind of remind ourselves on, when we are looking to attract a partner. All the red and pink flags that we sometimes find and overlook, or one of my favorites, staying with a partner because of potential and not what they actually are, right? Because especially for those of us, and I really want to touch upon this too, and I think you'll probably resonate with this, is the potential of someone is such an interesting thing, because we are spiritual beings, and many of the people listening and watching this are creative and empathic and sensitive and spiritual. And so wanting to see someone in their most divine sense is such a lovely quality that you have. And it makes you probably very good at whatever you're doing out in the world, whether it's, art, artistry, teaching, coaching, whatever. It's a beautiful characteristic to have, I think, when you're working with people, because you want to see the best in people and encourage them. When it comes to your partners, though, we have to treat those different, because how someone is in their divine, multidimensional self may be very different than what they're able to provide to you in a three-dimensional, everyday sense in a relationship. And so, while we want to be optimists and idealists, sometimes we have to kind of like, rein that in. So I just wanted to touch upon that and circle back to the
whole. And I do think also that when you are in a relationship, the relationships that you attract, either they're teaching you something or they're triggering you. That's it. Yep. So if you're in a relationship that triggers you, it is reflecting something about yourself and, what needs healing. Yep. You can be with a partner that's teaching you, and it can be a teachable moment where they're mirroring back to you how you see yourself. And so you learn from that experience and do the inner healing. Everything is always showing us how we can grow, every aspect.
Yeah, that's so true. And, when we're in touch with our intuition, via these practices that we're talking about and our connection to the divine feminine, we're able to delineate the difference between a learning moment versus someone who's just not right for us. right?
Right.
So that's the really important thing I think to take away here is, when you're in touch with your spirituality, when you're in touch with your divine feminine and masculine and all the above, you'll be able to delineate those sorts of things, right? It'll be easier to do
Right.
so. Yeah. There's another thing that I wanted to mention too. You're talking about if you're starting to manifest, what to start small with. I probably there's going to be some mixed background, right, in the audience here. Some people may be new to manifesting in general. A lot of people might be more uh, have more practice with it, right? That being said, though, whatever your background is, if you are new to this or if this is something that you're adding to your toolbox, I wanted to mention, because we talked just like for a second about trauma. And I'm actually going to be speaking into this trauma piece on another program as well, but I wanted to mention this real quick. The whole trauma thing is kind of a big deal, right? We're talking about past trauma from childhood. If you're starting manifesting, you may even have a relationship with manifesting that is, more longer term. But because of trauma, it's been challenging for you to manifest lately. If this is you, maybe you're not new to the manifesting journey, but you've been questioning it because you've had trauma. This is another good practice to do if you've experienced trauma. So maybe you're new to manifesting, or maybe you're not, and you've experienced some trauma that has challenged your ability to believe. If that's the case, I also agree with starting small. And just speaking from experience here, and I don't know if you've had experiences like this, Celia, but there was a point in my journey where I had some trauma, and I found that certain areas of my life were still on a really great manifesting track, and certain areas of life that were impacted by the trauma were really still challenged, or really challenged because of what happened. And so I had to kind of start small again, and that's okay. So I think that, our journeys as humans kind of ebb and flow. They're not like this straight line trajectory. Manifesting, I think, is probably the same way, and you might have different relationship with it depending on where you're at with your journey. But that being said, if you're at that point where you're kind of questioning where you're at, do what Celia said, start small again and see where it goes, and just be gentle with yourself. Right. So I wanted to mention
that. Another thing to remember is love and money are intertwined.
Yeah.
So if you're having a hard time manifesting love, probably having a hard time manifesting money as well, because it is a reflection of your worth.
Yeah.
It's how you see yourself, where you connect your value. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we live in a society that, monetary value is thought of as our personal value. So if our bank accounts don't reflect our value, we think that we don't have value. But you already have value. You were born with value. Yeah. It's just you're attracting money to you because it's only energy. So you're attracting money to you for your value. So that's why self-love is so important. And I'd like to, go over a little bit with the self-love aspect. Most women think self-love is pampering themselves. Let's go get a massage. Let me get my nails done. Let me go buy a new purse or a new pair of shoes. I'm showing myself self-love. Although those things can make you feel good, but self-love is having healthy boundaries. Self-love is from, setting intentions and keeping the promise to yourself. Because the reason why you don't manifest is because you write down all of these intentions and then you don't follow through. Mm-hmm. You have no follow through because you don't believe that you're deserving of it. And so self-love helps you, when you tap into your worth. Ultimately, that's where manifesting is leading you, back to your self-worth. When you have value, you become the attractor, and everything in life becomes easy. When you believe that you don't have value, and you're letting all of your subconscious thoughts, because they do show up in your life as a habit and you're unaware, they're running the show. And so that's where I like to say, all you have to do is take a look at your physical surroundings. Take a look at the people in your environment, where you live, the job that you're working at, or the business you're creating, or everything in your environment. And it will show you what you are thinking, how you feel about yourself, because whether you believe it or not, whether you believe in manifesting, you are manifesting all the time. So it's not something that you need to learn how to do because you're already a manifester. It is doing that inner work.
That's beautiful, Celia. I agree with all of that 100,000%, especially that last piece about the audit, the environment audit, right? So we have to wrap our program. I would love to continue the conversation. We just have time constraint here, but I've loved having you on the show, Celia. Would you like to speak briefly about, you have an offering, and I'd love for you to share that real quick with our audience if you would like to do that.
Yeah. So I have a book that I just self-published. It's called She's Magic, Learn How to Play the Game for an Enchanted Life. So this is about women empowerment. I put it in practical senses so you can kind of ask those questions. Everything that we've been talking about right now, it sets the ground for it. So it's the object of the game, it's the rules of the game, it is the challenges of the game, and how to play the game. And this is all about manifesting and really learning about who you are. And you can find that on Amazon. And this is the cover here. Show it really quickly. Thank you.
Love that.
Yeah, and so and I go over with manifesting with the moon. And it's available on Amazon. You can either search. Yeah,
we'll have a link in the program so people can go right to it. So
yeah,
that is beautiful, Celia. I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. So check it out, everyone listening and watching. So much. Thank you so much for joining us today, Celia. This is a fabulous conversation. I know I could talk to you about this stuff for hours and just jam out on it, but unfortunately I have to wrap. But anyway, thanks for coming, and enjoy the day, everyone.
Thanks for the invite.